Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into what might be one of the most disturbing documents ever published online. It's a sprawling manifesto, but it's also a 1,905-page suicide note. So picture this. It's September 2010. A man named Mitchell Heisman posts this huge 1,905-page document online. And right after, he takes his own life on the Harvard University campus. For him, this wasn't just some random text. It was his life's work. And here's what makes it so unbelievably strange. This text is two things at once. On one hand, it's this incredibly dense academic exploration of history, philosophy, and religion. But on the other, it's a suicide note. So the question is obvious, right? What on earth did it say? Let's get into it. The entire thing, all 1,905 pages, it all boils down to one single core idea, and it's a wild one. Heisman argues that what humanity has historically called God isn't a deity at all. Instead, it's a kind of primitive intuition about a future technological force. And the way he connects these two concepts is pretty fascinating. He's basically saying that the abstract God of monotheism was just a placeholder, kind of like an early draft for what he saw as the real deal, a technological singularity. You know, a self-improving artificial superintelligence, so powerful it would literally master and move beyond biology as we know it. Okay, so how does he even begin to argue this? Well, he reframes everything. All of human history is recast as this epic, unending war between two totally opposite forces. So on one side, you've got what he calls biological evolution. Think genes, instinct, tribal loyalty, our raw nature. But fighting against that is technological evolution. This is the realm of abstract ideas, or memes, as he puts it. Things like having a conscience or universal laws, basically anything that tries to get us to rise above our basic animal programming. And this chart really breaks down his whole worldview. He literally sorts everything into these two camps. So for biology, the basic building block is the gene. For technology, it's the meme, the idea. The driving force for biology, kin selection and race. For technology, abstract principles and law. And look at the historical champions he picks. This is where it gets really intense. For team biology, he puts Nazism. And for team technology, he points to Judaism and the monotheistic tradition it created. Now, his take on Judaism is absolutely central to his whole argument. He reframes it not as a religion, but as a kind of software designed to reprogram humanity. He argues that the big shift from believing in many gods, gods tied to nature and tribes, to believing in one single universal God of abstract law, that was the key moment. That was when team technology, as he calls it, really got its first big win in human history. According to the author, Judaism was created to solve a very specific problem. A problem, by the way, which he calls the Jewish kinship paradox. He claims, without offering evidence, that there was some unique biological tendency for internal descent that was threatening the group's survival. The proposed solution? Mosaic law, which he presents as a behavioral technology. In his view, this code of abstract rules was designed to override those divisive genetic impulses and force cohesion. And from this technological approach, a whole new set of values emerges. It's a system that prioritizes how things ought to be over just accepting how they are. It values the individual person, not just the genetic collective. In doing so, it intentionally throws a wrench into the gears of natural selection, setting humanity on a course toward a future where biology is no longer destiny, a post-biological existence. This all builds to the terrifying climax of the author's entire historical framework. This is where the war between biology and technology reaches its two possible and completely opposite endgames. In this framework, Nazism represents the absolute peak of team biology. It's a worldview that fanatically rejects the abstract, universal values of monotheism and instead places things like race, blood, and biological purity as the highest possible good. The author uses quotes like this to argue that the Nazis themselves actually understood this conflict. In their view, Christianity, which Heisman calls a Jewish invention, and its universalist morals were like a spiritual disease that weakened the biological strength of their race. And this leads to the argument's most chilling symmetry: two possible final outcomes for humanity. In the first, you have Auschwitz, where the tools of modern technology, trains, gas, industrial efficiency, are put in the service of a purely biological goal: racial purity. This is technology mastered by biology. The opposite path leads to the singularity, where technology becomes so powerful it completely masters and transcends biology itself. That is technology mastered by biology. So you might be asking yourself, why? Why construct such a gigantic, elaborate, and deeply unsettling theory of everything? This is where the text turns from a historical argument into a very personal confession. Yeah, this was never just an academic exercise for him. The author had a very specific, very personal goal: to find an answer to a question that had completely consumed him. And here it is. He tells us right at the beginning. The entire book is an experiment in what it means to truly believe in nothing. For Heisman, nihilism isn't just a mood. It's the logical conclusion of science and philosophy. If you follow reason all the way to the end, he claims, you discover there's no ultimate foundation for any of our values. Reason alone can't prove that life is better than death or that compassion is better than cruelty. And this is the experiment's horrifying conclusion. If valuing your own life is just an irrational biological superstition, Heisman reasoned, then the most rational act you can perform is to question it. He saw his suicide not as an act of despair, but as the final, logical step in his experiment. The 1,905 pages, that was him showing his work. And that is the final, haunting question Heisman's note leaves us with. It's a document born from a journey into an intellectual abyss, an attempt to map a world completely without value. And it suggests that, for a mind committed only to pure reason, maybe the final frontier is to turn that reason back upon itself.